Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. In today's show, I am delighted to be joined by Emma Inch. Emma is a renowned and respected beer writer and audio maker, known for her work both here in the UK and overseas. In 2018, Emma received the prestigious Beer Writer of the Year award, just one of many awards for her writing and audio work. As well as hosting her own podcast, Fermentation Beer and Brewing Radio, which happens to be one of my favourite shows, Emma has acted as taste judge for the prestigious World Beer Awards. Hello and welcome to the show, Emma.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on after so long.
Yes, yes, we've been trying to set this up for a while, haven't we?
we have, yeah. No, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's great to have you on. Just before we talk about beer, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Emma, and your journey and how you became a beer writer, please?
So, it wasn't sort of a straightforward journey, I suppose. I've always written. It was always something I wanted to do when I was younger. I always wanted to write, but took a different career path and ended up working in mental health for around 20 years, which thoroughly enjoyed, found very fulfilling. And on the side of that, I had hobbies. So I was very into music, still very into writing. So I did occasionally write for magazines.
Yeah.
And later on, I've moved into academia and wrote academic pieces as well. But through the music, I had a radio show on Brighton's Radio Reverb. I had a rockabilly radio show called Frockabilly. I also used to run some clubs as well called Frockabilly and various other DJ nights. But once my daughter came along a few years ago, I kind of stuck to the radio. And then kind of through that, I'd always loved beer. It'd always been my drink of choice. And, kind of when kind of craft beer began to really take off, I kind of put my two loves of radio and beer radio together and kind of thought, I wonder if there's a radio show in this, really. So started Fermentation Beer and Brewing Radio on Radio Reverb in Brighton. It was the UK's first beer-related show on FM radio. So did that for a while, and through that kind of also started writing about stuff, started meeting people, writing, contributing features to people, and kind of gradually kind of moved into doing a lot more of beer writing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been listening to your show probably for about a couple of years now, and you always have some great guests on, and you do a little bit of stuff where you go live, you go into breweries and all that sort of thing. It's really, really fascinating. And there was one chap you had on who was quite into homebrewing, and he would come on, I think it was every other show or something.
That's right, yeah, James, yeah. So he was very supportive in helping me set that up from the start, yeah. And he's an excellent homebrewer, and he's done some homebrew talks and stuff like that at BrewCon. I believe I believe he has anyway at the homebrew con in London. Fascinating guy. Yeah, did some interesting experiments. They're worth listening back to. Yeah.
You're still doing the show?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do it on the radio anymore. It's podcast only, and that's just because I wanted to explore that arena of podcasting really, as opposed to live radio or local radio. So. Kind of moved into that. It also gave me freedom about how often I could put the shows out. I could do, series of shows and that kind of thing. So it's been a lot more flexible over the last couple of years in terms of what I've done. So last year there was a show every 2 weeks. Then this year it's been different, as everything has. And I did a short series over lockdown of fermentation in isolation, it was called. So that kind of, looked at what was happening, tried to be of use to trade and consumer during that difficult time. And at the moment, it's sort of, we're having a little break while I work on some other projects, but it's still there. It's still around. It's certainly not gone anywhere. So,
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the next episodes. I mean, beer is quite an interesting thing. I've always liked beer. As soon as I was 18 or perhaps a little bit younger, I shouldn't say that, but as soon as I was 18, I was in pubs having a drink. And I guess probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, there seemed to have been a bit of a renaissance in beer.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
What actually happened?
Well, I think it's sort of, it kind of, we followed the States to a large extent, and to some extent still are a little bit.
Yeah.
The States had a massive revival in brewing, which I think home brewing was a big part of. Home brewing was made legal in the States, I believe, at the end of the 70s, and then sort of for the next couple of decades, people were experimenting with brewing and kind of experimenting with using hops and these new sort of these flavors that were unusual to most people kind of appeared, and I guess we kind of looked to the States and followed that to a certain extent. But the UK has a very strong brewing culture, as you know, anyway. So, unlike the States, we have this big history of cask ale, and that kind of never went away. Although it's had to fight for its life on a couple of occasions, but it's still there. So we've got kind of this combination, I think, and I think where we sit between the States on the one hand, our own brewing culture on the other, and then we're being so close to Europe as well with the beers of, say, Germany and Belgium. We're in a great place to have this sort of brewing renaissance. I mean, the other thing that happened was that taxes kind of changed in terms of brewing, and it became possible for people to make a bit more of a living brewing small amounts. So a lot more microbrewers came on the scene. A lot more small brewers came around because the tax situation meant that they didn't have to pay such big tax on making small amounts of beer. So it gave people kind of an opportunity to move into that. And I think there are all sorts of other, social and political reasons that probably were why people decided to move into brewing, alongside the whole, the things around being more local, being more organic, being, the same as we have with sourdough bread or good coffee, or, all of those things, all that kind of stuff came together, I think, and created this sort of massive amount of choice for an interested beer drinker.
Yeah, almost like a cottage industry.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there was a lot of stuff around that. Yeah,
yeah. It was interesting how probably from about 2000 to about 2010, you'd go to the supermarket and there'd be bottles of London Pride and all sort of traditional bottles, and then all of a sudden you had companies like Brewdog, for example, Punk, bringing it to the supermarkets, which I think was great, and gave people like myself a lot more opportunities to experience different flavours.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Brewdog really have taken it to people in terms of bringing beer to the supermarket, and often that is people's first experience of something different than beer they may have had before. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other breweries, actually not too far from where I live, Oakham Ales.
Oh yeah.
They did one called Citra.
Yes.
Which was, I think, quite ahead of its time.
Yes, I mean Citra is that's become quite an iconic beer, hasn't it? It's with the massive use of that Citra hop, the American hop, big bitterness. It's a great beer. It's Oakham Ales, should be rightly be very proud of that beer. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I like about your show is that you mention food pairing with beer, which is quite an interesting thing, really, because a lot of people just think, we'll have some wine to go with the dinner, but you, and I think, is it Jane Payton?
That's right. Yeah.
The food writer. You both talk about how you compare beers with food. Can you tell us a bit about that, please? Yeah.
So Jane is she's a beer sommelier. So the same as you have wine sommelier, she's a beer sommelier. She's also actually a cider pommelier. So, which means she has qualifications in both beer and cider. And part of that is around sort of encouraging this sort of pairing beer and food. And of course, it's to probably quote Jane quite a lot, beer is what people used to drink with food. In this country particularly, but over millennia, beer's been around, basically since the dawn of civilization, and people have always drunk beer with food. But also the great thing about beer is there's such a massive range of flavors in beer that mean it's such a versatile drink for pairing with whatever you've got, really, and for experimenting. You can go from big chocolatey dark beers to a very bitter bright IPA to a very fruity, juicy, hazy beer, to a crisp lager, to a sour, to a salty beer. There's so many different, to a smoked beer. They're fantastic with food, actually. But all these different beers that are so good and have so many qualities that are fantastic for pairing with food, that it has been very overlooked, I think. And I think it is gaining a bit more traction. But it's a way of getting people into beer who perhaps might have previously thought that beer was either sort of yellow and fizzy or brown and warm. It's a way of kind of encouraging people to think, actually, there is a bit more to beer. Maybe I do like beer, and maybe I would like that with my meal. And sort of encouraging people to have a think about that. It's quite a creative way of getting people into beer as well, I think.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I mean, I've got 3 daughters, and they're not big beer drinkers, but they do drink beer occasionally. And I it's quite interesting how beer traditionally was a bit of a blokey thing, but there's more and more ladies and girls that seem to like it now.
Yeah, I mean, very traditionally, it was always women who made the beer. Brewing beer was always a woman's job, in the same way as making the bread or doing stuff around the house, being preparing the food and drink for the house. It's always a woman's job. Until quite recently, really, if we think that beer's potentially been around for 10,000 years, it's only in the past sort of 500 or 600 years, really, that's become a man's job. That sort of came with sort of industrialization and, kind of brewing beer on bigger scale kind of thing. But traditionally, women, have had a lot to do with beer and with the development of it. And even in some countries, it's still the woman's job to make the beer. So, it's. But I think beer, yes, was kind of hijacked by this idea that it's a man's drink, that it's. And I think unhelpfully, some of that was it has to be drunk in pints. It has to be drunk, the association of beer and men's sport, I think, has excluded some women. And also, this sort of idea of buying in rounds, of buying, as I say, in pints. And some of that is a bit of a turn off for some women. But there are a lot of women in the brewing industry now.
Actually manufacturing beer.
Yes, yeah, there are. Yeah, so there's a number of brewsters, which is the word for a female brewer, or just female brewer, or just brewer. So there are women making beer. So there's I'll give you a couple of examples. Jager Wise at Wildcard in Walthamstow. She also appears on the Radio 4 Food and Drink show. People may have heard her there.
Yes, I've seen her. Yeah.
Yeah, she brews beer there. That's her brewery. Sarah Barton at Brewster's Brewery in Grantham. And then there's, a lot of women who are co-owners of breweries, or who are on brewing staff at breweries, or who are in the labs, or who are doing lots of different work at breweries. Some amazing female brewers around. And I think, and there's also some work going on. There's a group called Dea Lattice, which is a group of women in the beer industry who have done some research to look at what is preventing women from choosing beer as their drink. And I mean, it made pretty bleak reading, actually. Like you say, a lot of women don't choose beer as their drink of choice. I think the UK has one of the lowest, from what I understand, the UK has one of the lowest sort of ratios of women choosing beer to drink regularly. A lot of that is women fearing how they'll be judged for drinking beer, and some of that from men, but some from other women as well. The sort of fearing that they'll be judged as not feminine enough, or not looking after themselves enough. This sort of association that beer makes you fat, or beer makes you whatever, all that kind of stuff that isn't true, and that unfortunately kind of taints that image for women. So, the more women that can get into the industry, and maybe food, like you say, food and pairing food and beer is a way to encourage people who have perhaps not explored that area to explore it a little bit more.
I think I just think beer's. I love beer, and I brew beer, but I just think beer's so great because you get such a variety of flavours, from your IPAs down to your stouts, fruit beers, all sorts of different flavours.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great, which I think everybody ought to have a taste of, really.
Well, yeah, I mean, I defy anyone to say, so many people say, oh, I don't like beer. And it's like, how can you can't, it's like saying you don't like, I don't know, vegetables, any vegetable at all. Or, it's kind of, I don't like puddings. We don't like any puddings. So it's I think the problem is that unfortunately the range of beer that's being presented to people a lot of the time isn't the full range that there is. And if people are able to sit down and really explore the different styles of beer, I really do think that people will always find something that they like.
Yeah. What do you think about lager? Because that's got a bit of a tainted past, hasn't it, with the mass-produced stuff? And yet now I've found there's some really good ones.
Yeah, I think lager is it was the sort of at the back of the pack when the sort of putting it in inverted commas craft beer revolution kind of happened. I think there was sort of an idea that like you say, this perception of lager as being mass-produced or not the sort of thing that people who are into craft beer wanted to drink or whatever, which wasn't true. And as you say, there's some amazing lagers being produced at the moment. Though Lost and Grounded in Bristol produce an amazing Keller beer. And there's a brewery in London, Pillars, who are only producing lagers. And a number of breweries have recently produced some fantastic, lagers. So, yeah, it's definitely... and lagers, the range of lager is vast as well. When I first started really getting into beer, I started kind of tasting the different styles of beer, and there's so many styles of just lager. It's certainly not just sort of maybe some of the mass-produced stuff that people have come across. There's smoked lager, there's black lager, there's dark lager, there's all these different types of lagers. So
I'm getting quite thirsty. I know. It's not quite lunch yet, is it?
Not quite. It's probably a little bit early, but but talking about beer does tend to make you thirsty. Yeah,
it does. Yeah. And that and the food.
Yes.
Good gracious. Yeah. Actually, as a home brewer myself.
Yes, I didn't know you were a home brewer.
Yeah. I've been brewing a few years now, and I made one which everybody says is my best one, which was basically a German lager. Mm-hmm. Style, but then I put in some Mosaic and Amarillo
nice.
Towards the end of the boil and dry hopped it, and it's got this gorgeous sort of American hop sea flavour.
Oh, cool, thing. Yeah.
And then you've got the lager backdrop, which I found very nice. Nice,
yeah. I mean, it's so nice being able to homebrewing is so good for that, isn't it? You can experiment, on a scale that the big brewers can't, and even the economies of scale kind of mean that you can put in some very interesting ingredients into your home brew that bigger brewers can't. Yeah.
Are you still homebrewing, Emma?
I haven't for a while, I must admit, purely because of time, not because I don't want to. So, I have a little brew shed with I have a grain father system, and I love brewing, but I've never managed to. Some people say they can sort of whip off a home brew in a morning. I've never managed to do that. It always seems to take me the entire day. I just haven't had the time for it recently. But it's such a wonderful thing to do. So rewarding. Yeah.
I can, if anybody's thinking about doing home brewing, who's listening to this, but you think, it's a bit complicated and take a lot of time. Yes, it does take a bit of time, but it's well worth it. And it's great fun, isn't it?
It's really good fun.
The smell as you put the hops in and everything, and the steam, and just takes you back, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think also if you're into cooking in any way, which so many people are nowadays, and especially since lockdown, so many people have discovered a love of cooking or baking or fermenting in terms of, sourdough bread or fermenting vegetables and stuff. It's all of those things. It's that sort of the art and the science kind of mixed together, and it doesn't take much to be able to do. You don't need much equipment to be able to do it. You can do it quite simply on your stovetop. You don't need to go mad. Obviously, if you're like me, you end up, then going down some sort of rabbit hole of buying every single thing there is. But and brewing more and more. But yeah, you really don't have to. You can brew in quite small scales on your stovetop, and it's a lovely thing to do.
It is, and I think the other thing is that of course you've got to be clean and you've got to sanitize everything, but I think beer in its making is quite forgiving.
It is, yeah.
A few extra ingredients by mistake, it sort of works itself out, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah. On the whole, as long as you've not got an infection, you can come up with something pretty good even on your first go, I think.
Yes, yeah. Obviously, having listened to your show, you've travelled around a lot to see many breweries, certainly in the UK, but also abroad, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's been very lucky actually. So I mean, last year, one of the best trips I've been on was to the Czech Republic, and we went to a number of different breweries, in Bohemia, and it was just wonderful to see another culture of brewing. They're the biggest beer drinkers in the world, apparently, the Czechs. To see another beer culture in action, and to hear from the brewers in some very, very traditional breweries and some more modern breweries what they're doing, to watch what they're doing, to taste their beers, to talk to them about the issues that are around. It's fascinating, and I think I'm thinking of also another night when I was in Barcelona. I went to Barcelona at the beginning of last year to the beer festival over there, which is an amazing beer festival. But I was on my own one evening and wanted to check out a couple of beer bars, and I kind of think you're never alone if you're a beer fan, really, because within half an hour or so of being in a bar, I was sat at a table with sort of a Dutch guy, a Swedish guy, someone from Brazil, I think, and someone from Spain, and we didn't share the same language, but we had the language of beer, and we had a wonderful night together, and you just kind of it's such a convivial drink, I think, that kind of brings people together over geography, over time. It links us to our past. It links us to people in other cultures around us, and it's an amazing thing that you can track through all different cultures and make friends. Yeah,
and I think the people certainly the people, I don't know many people, but from what I hear, the actual brewers themselves, although they want to run a very successful business, they help each other out. Have you found that?
I think that I've been told that a lot by brewers, that sort of they're going in, when they go into that business from maybe being in a different industry, they go into the beer industry and they're amazed at how much help they're given by people in the industry. I think there is that sort of course people are often competing for the same customers, but they're also working together to create a scene that is exciting and wonderful, and that everyone kind of benefits from. And you kind of see that in the collaboration brews that are often done between a lot of newer brewers. They'll brew collaborations. They'll learn from each other. See how other people do it on their kit. See how they might make things, give contributions to that, and and I think that that really brings the whole scene together, really.
Yeah. One thing I meant to ask you when we were talking earlier on about how has been almost like a renaissance in beer is the term craft beer. How would you define craft beer? I'm sorry, is it a hard one?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. I think it's interesting. There is no written definition of craft beer. In the States, the Brewers Association have endeavoured to have a definition of a craft brewery. But over here, we don't have that, and we don't have a definition of craft. And I think it has racked people's brains for a while. I think perhaps not so much now. I think people are kind of relaxing into it. I think a bit, sort of this idea that we had to somehow define what was craft and what wasn't craft, and I think unfortunately in this country with our as I say, with our very strong brewing heritage in terms of cask ale, at times older cask brewers got left out of that definition. That sort of craft, some people's definition of craft beer was excluding of that. It was more around, sort of the new big American hop flavors, kegged beer, colder beer, fizzier beer. It was around that. And more challenging styles kind of thing, rather than sort of the cask breweries, and I suppose if you're thinking of what the word craft really means, what does the word craft really mean? Pete Brown, the beer writer, has just written a book about this. But if you're really thinking about it, then surely, brewing an ale in a traditional way that's been done for hundreds of years, creating a live product that lives in the pub cellar, sure, that to me sounds like a craft. So I think there was there was a lot of sort of worrying about that phrase, I think. And I think it's used sometimes by multinational brewers, to define a certain part of their range. They'll have one bit of their range that's sort of the stuff they've always made, and then they'll have this other bit. Oh, that's our craft beer, and so it's kind of it's hard to give it a meaning, really, and so it is something I try to avoid, or I put it in inverted commas, which is hard to do in audio. But I know what you mean. It's something that I think in some ways we think we know what we mean, and often we're right. But then there's these outliers that you think, I'm not sure whether that is, and I'm not sure whether that is. So does that make the word redundant? I'm not sure.
So maybe we shouldn't worry too much about the definition.
I don't think we should.
Good quality, well-produced beer with great
and things that people, and I think particularly people nowadays, and it was shown over lockdown and stuff, that people are very keen to get their hands on something that's local, something that they know how it's produced. They know the people who have produced it. They can have it delivered to their door by a brewery that's just down the road, and those sorts of things I think are really important to people, perhaps more so than sort of, is it craft or is it not?
As long as it's a nice beer to drink.
Yes.
I noticed on your show, and I forgive me, I can't remember the name of the brewery, but there seem to be a number of breweries that are really into the sort of environmental sustainability part of brewing beer with their brewing. But there was one you went to visit. It was in the south of England.
That's right. Yeah. So that was Good Things Brewing. Yeah. So so they're not far away from me, on the sort of Kent-Sussex border. And they, it's an incredible brewery, actually, run by a very sort of driven guy who used to work in sustainable engineering, now works in brewing, and had this commitment to build this kind of zero impact brewery. And it's incredible. They've got a sort of a whole field of solar panels, so the whole place is off grid, and in fact they're able to pump electricity back in. They create more electricity than they use. Oh, right. They have a borehole in the back of their brewery where they get their water direct from sort of in the downs. And again, they bring up more water than they use and are able to share that, or they've got more than they need anyway. But they're also very very careful around making beer can be a very sort of water hungry, which maybe that should be water thirsty process.
With all the cooling and everything.
Lots of cooling, lots of cleaning. It can take a number of pints of water to make 1 pint of beer. So they're very committed to reducing that. They also, a lot of brewers, many brewers give their spent grains that have been in the mash tun and finished with, they give the sort of their barley or whatever to farmers for cattle feed. But Good Things sort of take that one step further. They dehydrate all their spent grains. They grind it up in using a very traditional mill, and make flour, which can then be used to make bread and pizzas and all the rest of it. So they're quite an amazing place. And I actually, sustainability is big for everybody. There's other breweries who are very doing a lot of work around it at the moment. So Adnams in Suffolk, they're very committed to sustainability, and Brewdog, I believe, have just bought a 2,000-acre plot to plant. I think their ambition is to plant 1 million trees.
I saw that.
Yeah, so there's
another crowdfunding thing.
That's right. Yeah, so it's a big issue. In fact, I was listening back to some audio that I'd made around this time last year, where sustainability was such a massive thing, and it was a real sort of snowball gathering pace rolling down a hill that that I said, I predict that sustainability will be the big issue dominating beer and pubs for the next year, for whole of 2020. Of course, it little did I know that there'd be another kind of issue dominating beer and pubs. But I think sustainability it's still at the forefront of people's minds, and perhaps even more so now with this consumer wish to have local products and ethically made products and that kind of stuff. People they want to know where to spend their money, and they're making a lot of more judgments about how they spend it.
Yes, I think we're all doing that, aren't we?
I think so. Yeah.
So you mentioned there what happened this year. I mean, I don't know what's happened, but how has COVID affected the beer industry, do you think?
Oh, it's been awful. I think it's there's been a number of changes, but I mean, a lot of breweries supply solely or pretty much 80 or 90% of their production goes to pubs and bars. Yeah. So when lockdown happened, that just went. Every customer that they had just went. So some breweries stopped brewing altogether. Some of them reduced their brewing, and a lot of them scrabbled to get online, start packaging their beer in small pack and selling direct to customers. So that happened to a lot of people. But according to SIBA, the Society of Independent Brewers, there was an 82% drop in beer sales following lockdown. I mean, it's enormous. It's enormous. Yeah. And that's what sort of independent brewers were reporting to them. So, it's had this enormous hit on people. Some people have managed to get their online stuff, managed to, keep themselves going with online sales and, when pubs could reopen or tap rooms could reopen, getting a little bit more trade there, developing kind of really good links with their customers. But it's been incredibly hard, and it remains hard. As we speak, we're waiting for an announcement today, aren't we, from the from the Prime Minister on what will happen next in terms of lockdown arrangements. And I think it's. Pubs have had an extremely hard time, but it's also the supply chain behind pubs as well. Of which the brewers are a part, and it's it's incredibly hard for them when their main customer just disappears. It just goes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been hard for everybody, hasn't it? In fact, there was a pub not far from me in Peterborough that in the spring that turned itself from a pub to a garden centre.
Right.
How's that for diversifying?
Diversifying. But there's some pubs did some incredible stuff over lockdown. The pub local to me that helped delivered Meals on Wheels to vulnerable customers, and a lot of pubs that really went the extra mile, and breweries as well. That were even in the midst of the nightmare that they were in, was still raising money for people, was still doing stuff for people that really helped their community and supported their community. And I hope and I believe that people will remember that, and that people will have their loyalties towards those breweries in the future, and those pubs that really, as you say, went that extra mile. Yes.
No, I think it's great. So you won an award in 2018. Could you tell us about that, please?
So I won the British Guild of Beer Writers Beer Writer of the Year, which was very, very exciting.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I was it's great. So the British Guild of Beer Writers is what it says on the tin, basically. So beer writers in Great Britain can join that, and in fact, we've got there's our beer writers from elsewhere in Europe, and I believe sometimes the States also join the guild or affiliate to the guild. They give out a number of awards every year, and I was lucky enough to win the Beer Writer of the Year award, which was very good. So I think from what I can tell, going back in history, another woman had won it alongside her writing partner before. So there's a pair of beer writers who write together. They'd won it before, but there hadn't been another woman who won it on her own before. So I was the first solo woman to win that award. So thank you. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Yeah, and if anybody listening would like to get into the beer industry, either through a home, perhaps they enjoy home brewing or they want to change of career, what would you say to that person if they wanted to do that?
At the moment, oh my God.
Don't.
I think it's an amazing industry. And as I say, it's not, home brewing is a fantastic way to start to learn about beer and to learn, that there is more, it is, as I said earlier, I think both an art and a science. You've got to know both really to be producing good, consistent, drinkable beer, yes, and exciting and interesting beer. So I think homebrewing is a great way to start. And, reading, learning, tasting different styles of beer, getting to know different styles of beer, that might involve having to, get some stuff on mail order from different countries or whatever through Beers of Europe or whatever, who's an online retailer. But, taste a whole load of beer as well. Find out what it is you like, what it is you don't like. Find out about the history of all the beers. Because that for me is, one of the most interesting parts. Beer is so has this massive history behind it. That's yes, there's always something to learn and something to talk about. Yeah. And I guess the industry is facing challenges at the moment, but there are often opportunities at breweries in terms of volunteering. I don't know how that would be at the moment in
with
COVID restrictions. I'm not sure how that would be. But yeah, it's kind of don't rule it out as something to do. It's an industry that's lasted many thousands of years and will continue to. So yes, people will always want beer.
They will.
When we get through this, people will definitely want beer. Yeah.
And we will get through this.
Yes, we will.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Which should be great. And I think the other interesting thing is that I think, to correct me if I'm wrong, Emma, but are there something like 2,000 independent breweries in the UK?
Yeah, there are. I mean, I worry that some of them may fall by the wayside through this current crisis. But yes, there are. Yeah, around 2,000, I think, is a rough estimate of how many there are.
I think the other interesting thing is that they still represent only about, is it 8% or something of the total brewing market in the UK?
It is something like that. I don't know the exact figures, but it is something like that, which makes me very optimistic that there's still a lot of people who perhaps haven't discovered newer, different styles of beer. They may still they may love beer, but they've not they've either not come across it, or perhaps they've felt excluded by it in some way or other. And so that there's still a massive market that to reach out to, really. Yeah. And because lots of people like beer. I mean, lots of people like mainstream beer, and that's fine. That's the beer they like. But if people want to try something perhaps that they've not tried before, then there's lots of opportunities for that, and there's lots of opportunities, I think, for the area of kind of independent brewing to grow.
Yes.
Given the right circumstances, which obviously we're not in at the moment, but given the right circumstances, I think there's room for it to grow, and there's more consumers to get on board. Yeah.
So, what current up and coming projects have you got, Emma, coming up that you'd like to tell listeners about?
So, at the moment, I'm trying, anyway, within the limits of lockdown, to work on a video project which is called Fermentation on Tour. Right. So that involves me going to various breweries around the country. Well, drinks producers actually, but mainly breweries around the country to find out how they're getting on at the moment, really, and how sort of COVID has affected them and where they are, kind of thing. And I'm doing that in my little motorhome, which I've got. Oh, right. So I'm poodling around, which is literally on tour. So it's kind of quite good in the age of COVID to have your own self-contained facilities on wheels. So it kind of means you don't need to brush up against anyone or anything like that. So I've been doing a bit of that. So the first sort of episode or very short series of that will come out soon, and
looking forward to that.
Yeah, it should be good fun.
Is that coming out on television?
No, that'll be on YouTube. That'll be on YouTube channel. So which is Fermentation Productions. But the stream is called fermentation on tour. So that should be around soon. And I've got podcast material in the pipeline to get out there. So there's still stuff coming in around that. But also I've got I recorded a series last year called Cider's Web, another podcast series around cider. Which then COVID again interrupted. So that will be appearing at some point as well. So so there's a few things waiting. Yeah.
Well, what I'll do, I'll grab all the links from it, if you don't mind, and we'll put all that on the show notes.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. Yeah.
Have a listen to it and have a look as well. That's great stuff.
Excellent.
Yeah. So thank you ever so much for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for asking me.
It's been great hearing all this stuff, and I'm sure listeners will enjoy it. And I wish you all the very best.
Yes, and you. Take care. Good luck.
Thanks very much, Emma. You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family. And if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.